After World War II, things were pretty good in the Soviet Union. The economy was stronger than before, and they had many technological advances such as Sputnik. However, the country slowly started to weaken. The system of collective agriculture did not end up working very well for the nation. It got to the point where there were food shortages in the Soviet Union because food production was not getting enough done. We also see the Soviet satellite nations becoming unhappy with the Soviet Union. This leads to some revolts against the Soviet Union, such as the Hungarian Revolt in 1956. Lastly, the Soviets' invasion of Afghanistan hurt the nation a lot. Since the Soviets were never really able to completely take over Afghanistan, they lost a lot of money and it damaged the country's morale. Because the country was suffering so much, the new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, decided that the country needed to be reformed. Two policies that he advocated were glasnost and perestroika. Glasnost was the idea of openness. It was the end of government censorship of the media, so people can now criticize the government and suggest ways to make things better. Before this policy, this idea of openness was not allowed. The other policy, perestroika, means restructuring. Under this policy, the Soviet government and economy changed. It allowed for some private industry instead of having everything owned by the government. The policy of glasnost led to Soviet satellite nations pushing away from communism in the late 1980s. In Poland, we see the solidarity movement of workers, which caused the complete fall of communism in Poland in 1989. In Germany, we see the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. This ended the communist control of East Germany, and in 1990, Germany completely reunified. U.S. President Ronald Reagan was a strong factor in the destruction of the Berlin Wall. In 1987, Reagan stood atop the Brandenburg Gate and challenged the Soviet leader and said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." It was the first time a Western leader dared to issue such a challenge. So with all of this going on in the late 1980s and early 1990s, the Soviet Union began to lose power. From 1988 to 1991, most of the Soviet republics began to break away from the Soviet Union. Also, Gorbachev was nearly overthrown in 1991, making him weaker than he already was. This led to him resigning in late 1991, which was the end of the existence of the Soviet Union. Similar things were happening in the satellite nations, which completed the fall of communism in Eastern Europe. This event was important to Americans because America was not a fan of communism. While America did not care about destroying communism, Americans did not want it to spread all throughout Europe. Therefore, we supported countries who were not communist in order to keep them from becoming communist. The fall of communism was a good thing for America because we would no longer have to worry about it spreading. As we look back to the events that took place in the late 1980s and early 1990s, we realize how important of a role Reagan played in ending communism. President Reagan forced the Soviet Union to abandon its goal of world socialization by challenging the Soviet regime's legitimacy, by regaining superiority in the arms race, and by using human rights as a weapon as powerful as any in the U.S. or Soviet Union. These events have a legacy of freedom from communist control.